And welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. We have got a packed program for you today. All three of our correspondents for Border Report Live and BorderReport.com will be joining us in just a little bit to talk about some of the top stories that happened all across the border, from here in the Rio Grande Valley all the way out to San Diego, California, where our Salvador Rivera is at. So we'll get to them in just a little bit for this final episode of 2025. But first, as always, we're going to start off today by taking a look at what's trending across the border. Starting with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says 13 people died and another 98 people were injured when a train derailed on a rail line connecting the Pacific Ocean with the Gulf of Mexico. The interoceanic train linking the states of Oaxaca and Veracruz went off the rails Sunday as it passed a curve near the town of Nizanda. The accident halted traffic along the line. Officials have said that 241 passengers and 9 crew members were on the train when the accident happened. The interoceanic train was inaugurated in 2023. In California, another powerful storm has moved through Southern California over the holiday, making it one of the wettest Christmases in years. Heavy rain and gusty winds were blamed for at least 2 deaths. Forecasters warned the additional rain could increase the risk of debris flows in waterlogged areas scorched by wildfires in January. Throughout Southern California, residents had to deal with floodwaters. In Wrightwood, a mountain town about 80 miles northeast of Los Angeles, it experienced flooding, where firefighters were warning people to evacuate as late as the morning of Christmas Eve. Also happening, a multi-agency human trafficking operation conducted earlier this month rescued 19 victims in just 3 days across San Diego County. The district attorney's office said the annual Home for the Holidays human trafficking task force operation took place at motels in Chula Vista, National City, and San Diego. The operation also led to the arrest of 4 men, including a registered sex offender, on charges including pimping, pandering, and violating a protective order. Also happening, Homeland Security officials have been urging undocumented migrants to self-deport. DHS said migrants who leave the country on their own before Wednesday, New Year's Eve, they will receive a $3,000 stipend and a free flight home via the CBP Home app. Sources that we've spoken to here on Border Report Live say that those numbers are debatable, if even existent, for some of their clients that have self-deported. Now, sources told News Nation's Ali Bradley that U.S. Border Patrol teams plan to forego carrying out larger raids that have taken place at locations such as the Home Depots. Instead, they now plan to focus on specific targets such as criminals convicted of serious crimes. And that is a look at what's trending across the border. As we said, in this episode of Border Report Live, we're doing something a little bit different. We have all 4 of our correspondents from here in South Texas all the way to San Diego joining us today to talk about some of the top stories that they covered over the year of 2025. And we're going to kick off our coverage today with our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendiz, who's going to kick it off for us. Julian?
Rudy, undoubtedly the biggest story on the U.S.-Mexico border in 2025 was the virtual disappearance of the large crowds of migrants that were coming over from Mexico, from countries all over the world, and coming across to ask for asylum or just to try to come in and work. What happened was that the new president was elected back in November of 2024, and immediately as soon as January came over, he made good on promises to pretty much stop people from coming across through the asylum process. President Trump took away the possibility of people, some of them, if not many of them, with legitimate claims, from coming in between ports of entry and presenting an application or showing up for their appointments through a online mechanism that used to be known as a CBP One app. I spoke to many in Juarez, Mexico, who had appointments on the week of January 20, January 21st, etc. And they were basically stuck at the border when this administrative changes took over. Obviously, there were some more changes associated with this effort to regain control of operational control of the U.S. border, and that included the setting up of what it's called national defense areas, pretty much saying through this executive order, I'm going to send soldiers to these parts of the border, and if you step into this portion of the border across the border wall, across the Rio Grande without authorization, you are going to face a new charge, and that is trespassing on military property. This also brought about the deployment of thousands of American troops to the U.S. border wall, to the valleys in the desert where migrants used to cross illegally. And this happened here in El Paso, through from El Paso to all the way to the east and close to Hudspeth County, and in New Mexico, in all of southern New Mexico, in what's known as New Mexico National Defense Area. This included the deployment also of the controversial deployment of heavy armor equipment. We call them strikers. They look like miniature tanks. They're armor personnel carriers. They don't have offensive capability, but they do look scary from the other side of the border. And I have seen them numerous times as I have crossed the border, driven along Mexico, and seen this impressive hardware just pointing its sides to the Mexican side. Definitely, it is something that looks like a visual deterrent. Obviously, there's two sides to this story. The other side was what happened to the migrants, like I said, who were fleeing poverty, who were fleeing crime, who were fleeing political persecution, which is one of the things that our asylum laws protect people from the world over against. Many of those people were initially stuck on the border. They were hoping Trump would change his mind. That did not happen. So in March and April, we started seeing an exodus from the shelters, the Mexican shelters, as people return. Some of them return home. Many of them just shelter or hunker down in big cities in Mexico, such as Mexico City, where they can pretty much, get lost in the crowd. And others, we heard of others who left the border and entirely gave up on the United States and began asylum applications in other countries. I hear that Spain was a popular destination.
Now, Julian, another thing that you covered was that was a pretty big newsmaker was the topic of the hundreds of bodies found at a crematorium just across the border from you in Juarez. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, specifically here in El Paso, Juarez area, I can tell you that the two biggest border stories, one here in El Paso, was the January discovery of a smuggling tunnel that run under the Rio Grande, America's fifth largest river. There's debate of whether this was an engineering wonder or just a very simple mechanism. It started on a 6-lane highway in Juarez, went for about a quarter of a mile under the ground, and it surfaced on the American side, on the other side of the Rio Grande, in some storm drains. So it was a very sophisticated piece of engineering in which I am told was used by the cartels, by whoever built it, namely the drug cartels, the smugglers, to bring over high-value drugs such as fentanyl, such as high-grade meth, but also high-value, what they call high-value migrants. And that would be the people from India, from China, from very far-away places that pays the highest amounts, $15,000, $20,000, and they want to make sure that they're going to be able to get across the United States for the kind of money that they pay. So this tunnel was discovered through intelligence gathered by the Border Patrol and by Homeland Security investigations in El Paso. That is, maybe they caught some migrants here and there, and the migrants, when they asked the migrants, how did you come in? They told them about the tunnel. So the tunnel has since been sealed up, and an investigation obviously is ongoing. I am told, although it's still ongoing, that there have been some indictments on the U.S. side, possibly of smugglers. And on the Mexican side, where most of this structure was built, there's an ongoing investigation, but as far as I know, there have been no arrests. One thing that I have learned in the 10, 11 months since the discovery of this tunnel is how it was built in, basically in plain view. There's a 6-lane highway on the Mexican side where it begins. I am told that a bus, a public transportation bus, or a number of buses used to park right over the entrance of the tunnel, and that's how the work got done. That's how the dirt was removed without most people, noticing, because nobody ever saw the big dump trucks or the construction equipment. This was done with very basic type of tools and techniques. So that's pretty much the biggest story of the year on the El Paso border. On the Mexican border, you would think that the cartel violence would dominate, and yeah, there have been close to 1,000 murders in Juarez, Mexico this year so far in 2025. I think the count is around 950, 960. But the biggest story over there was the discovery of this residence, this building, where Juarez police officers who were on patrol were called to that building. And when they entered that building, they discovered hundreds, specifically 386 embalmed bodies, just piled up, lying around in a small warehouse, in offices, in rooms, bathrooms of the place. And what the investigation showed is that what happened is that this place operated as a crematorium, as a legitimate crematorium. It took bodies and turned the remains into ash, gave the ashes to relatives and all that. But 2 years ago, this crematorium was cited for health violations. At the same time, maybe because of it or coincidentally, their gas was shut off, so the incinerator was not functioning. What the allegation is that the owners of this crematorium just didn't tell their the funeral homes they were doing business with that this has happened. They just kept receiving these bodies and just piling them up, letting them, excuse the impression, letting them rot and getting the money. So far, very small number of the bodies have been identified, and this has caused a lot of grief, mostly to Juarez families who discovered with horror what had happened to their loved ones. But also there's a few families from El Paso who have relatives in Mexico and who believe or suspect that they also, their relatives also are among the victims of that crematorium. It's hard to tell because, like I said, most of the bodies remain unidentified. But it was a shocking event on both sides of the border.
Yeah, shocking is just about the best word you can use to describe that. Just absolutely horrific to when we heard that story and saw some of the images. We appreciate your reporting, not just today, Julian, but all year long. We look forward to next year. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas, and joining me now is our South Texas correspondent standing right next to me, Sandra Sanchez. Hey, Sandra.
Hi, Rudy. It's been a great year talking to you about the border issues.
Yeah, a long year. Can't believe we've been doing this for almost a full year now, every day, but it's been a lot of fun. But why don't you fill us in on what you think some of the top stories are from this year?
Yeah, to reiterate what Julian said, the border crossings are pretty much stopped here in South Texas. The rafts that used to come across with families and unaccompanied children that were organized by the cartel no longer cross with these groups of people, hundreds, thousands, who would just walk on shore and turn themselves into Border Patrol to try to claim asylum. That isn't happening. People are still crossing. They're trying to elude the checkpoint. That's leading to chases, especially in the counties to the north, like, say, Brooks County. Through the Falfurrias Border Patrol checkpoint there. But as far as the Rio Grande, it's slow, it's deserted. We've rode with the Coast Guard this year. We've done several ride-alongs with Border Patrol, and it's hard to find someone crossing nowadays. As Julian mentioned, they did declare a national defense zone, these national defense areas, these NDAs, and they put up posts and signs here in the Rio Grande declaring 250 miles of Hidalgo and Cameron County are now a military zone. That means anyone who does try to illegally cross in between ports of entry through these areas could face additional charges, but we're not seeing them yet in the court system. We think that's something that the Trump administration might really focus on in 2026. So we're keeping an eye on that. The fear of deportations and arrests, as Julian also mentioned. Of course, that's paralyzed many people, many communities throughout the country, and South Texas here, the Rio Grande Valley, is no different. Many restaurants have closed. Families have stopped leaving their homes, going to churches and even school because they're afraid of arrests. This has affected businesses and the number of people crossing or just being out in public. But one of the things that have led also to fear here in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas is the New World screwworm. And we've talked about this many times on the show. It's not, as you know, Rudy, it's not a worm. It's a fly, right? It was closest seen 70 miles from Zapata, kind of outside Laredo, in the town of Sabinas Hidalgo in Nuevo León, which is a state in northern Mexico. And we have been working furiously to try to keep it at bay. This is a little pest that can kill an animal, livestock. In 2 weeks, it lays its larva in wounds of infected animals or sores of a person, a pet, cattle, horses. And once it crosses the border, it could do $2.1 billion to the cattle industry. You know, we've already seen cattle prices significantly go up. We've had a all stop on cows to be imported from Mexico. They're not allowing that because they're making sure that no animal will cross that could be potentially infected. Mexico's really doing its part to try to screen it. And here in South Texas, what we're doing is that we've converted this former air base. We're flying 1 million sterilized male screwworm flies down to southern Mexico and Panama every week, and they're trying to make it 3 million next year. These planes are taking off from Moore Air Base in Edinburgh. And so it's, we've got inspectors on the ground. We have fly traps. We have cameras. Everybody is an all-out lookout to make sure that this pest doesn't cross the border. So
yeah, and I think people underestimate the economic impact that thing making it over would have, and how it would completely change the way we decide what we're going to put on our dinner tables every single night if it were to get here. So definitely some good reporting from you on that over the last year.
Absolutely. And then, talking about things that have made us scared on the border has been fear of not having enough water. As we also talked about this many times, Mexico, under a 1944 treaty that we have with them, is supposed to pay the United States water via the Rio Grande, and we pay Mexico via the Colorado River. We pay them annually 1.5 million acre feet. We've never defaulted. But Mexico's 5-year cycle was up at the end of October, and they didn't pay what they owed. They paid just over half of the 1.75 million acre feet that they're supposed to pay us. And then recently, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum came out and announced that she was going to pay about 400,000 additional acre feet. So that number's gone up a little bit, but it's still not the 1.75 million acre feet. And that has affected farmers, ranchers, municipalities. It's really changed the way communities down here are thinking long term. They realize that we've got to find a solution. We can't rely on the old model. This isn't just Mexico to blame. There's been drought. There's been overpopulation on both sides of the border. And so, they're talking desalination plants. Those are long-term, very expensive, and they're going to take a while. They're talking using groundwater, gray water. So, there's a lot of different methods that they're trying to implement going forward in 2026. Finally, with the water, I want to mention the new waterborne barriers, which are part of this smart wall plan that the Trump administration's announced. Last week, we had a guest on the show, an environmentalist, who said that they were confirmed from Laredo that they have been told these will be border buoys. We've shown you many times these buoys that the state of Texas put in Eagle Pass, and now it is confirmed. Border Patrol Chief Mike Banks this week told another media in Washington that it's going to be 500 miles of these border buoys, very similar to what Texas put up. We know that here we're going to have 22 miles in Cameron County, and they're going to be 80 miles in the Eagle Pass, Del Rio area. We're looking at least 100 miles here in South Texas, but 500 miles from Brownsville to San Diego, somewhere along along the border, he said, in the vulnerable areas where he says it's needed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting this year, Sandra. We appreciate you being here. South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this final edition of Border Report Live for 2025. I'm Rudy Mireles here in South Texas. Joining me now, San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera. Salvador, to go ahead and fill us in on some of the stories that you think are the top stories from this year.
Well, Rudy, not to harp or dwell on stuff that Julian and Sandra have already mentioned, but of course, the border, January 20, when President Trump took office, things seemed to go south really quickly. And I mean, we stopped seeing apprehensions along the border. Here in San Diego, 833 apprehensions in the month of November. So compare that to November last year when there were 10,570. And by then, President Biden had already started his own crackdown on immigration. The year before, in November for 2023, 31,163 apprehensions. What we're seeing now is being described as historic low number, something that has not been seen since the 1960s. Here in San Diego, immigration is big, but pollution along the border is something that continues to make headlines in San Diego. We continue to get inundated with millions and millions of gallons of raw sewage that enters from Mexico on a daily basis, especially on a day like today when it's raining. We're going to see tens of millions of gallons of raw sewage that's going to flow right into the U.S., right along the Tijuana River Valley. A lot of this stuff will end up in the valley and out in the Pacific Ocean. The EPA is trying to do a lot more to crack down on what's going on, fix the problem, mitigate what's going on. But without Mexico getting serious, this problem is going to go on for a long time. Quick story. On Friday, I took my niece down to San Isidro, no more than half a mile from the border, for a holiday event. And the first thing she said when she got out of the car is, "What is that smell?" And I had to explain to her, you are smelling basically raw sewage that people along the border have been putting up for decades. And she also asked, well, why don't they do anything to fix it? And I said, well, that is the big question that a lot of us who live down here has been asking for many, many decades. And now this year also saw President Trump sent 400 Marines to the border to help Border Patrol with border protection. The Marines are basically in the background. They weren't doing a lot of frontline operations. They were basically offering support, and they strung millions, well, not millions, but a lot of hundreds and hundreds of miles of concertina wire along the border to prevent the migrants from trying to hop over the wall into U.S. territory. We also saw ICE raids continue here in California, especially not just in the fields, but places of work, Home Depots. But now we're seeing ICE take a different tactic. They are actually camping out at ICE facilities, courthouses, federal courthouses. They're also kind of camping out at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services offices, waiting for people who show up to renew their green cards or their visas. And at that point, they're being arrested. Some are actually ending up in detention facilities, and some are actually getting deported. And speaking of deportations, according to several agencies, government agencies and public and private agencies, we're hearing that under Biden last year, 685,000 people were deported. So far under Trump this year, 600,000 or so. So a lot less than what President Biden did the year before. We also saw a lot of protests in Los Angeles. We saw President Trump sent the National Guard to California to sort of police the streets, something that did not make Governor Newsom happy. A lot of local politicians, lawmakers, people in the communities were saying, we don't need the National Guard. We're fine. You're overblowing it. You're exaggerating what's going on. And eventually the National Guard did leave California. One big other story here in Otay Mesa East, a toll port of entry is finally getting built. It's under construction, and that is expected to be done sometime in 2029, and it will alleviate and help with the border crossing towns both northbound and southbound. And Rudy, lastly, and this is for our executive producer, Border Reports, Fernando Ortiz, a team from Southern California won the World Series. The Los Angeles Dodgers beat the Toronto Blue Jays. team that included a local boy, a kid from San Diego, Tijuana region, Alejandro Kirk, who made headlines not only for his field, his statistics, and the great player that he has become, but he also has become a source of pride for a lot of people here along the border.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Salvador. We appreciate your reporting all year long, as we do everybody that you see on your screen. My name is Rudy Mireles. On behalf of Julian Resendiz in El Paso, Salvador Rivera in San Diego, California, and Sandra Sanchez right here in South Texas, the Border Report team, Fernando Ortiz, our executive producer, and everybody that has a hand in putting this program as well as borderreport.com together every single day of the year. We wanted to wish you all a very happy new year. May it be safe, may it be blessed, and we look forward to seeing you next year. That's it for today. We'll see you all on January and next week.